Robert Moses is one of the most consequential men in the history of New York City. During his multi-decade run in city and state politics in the 1900s, he was behind the construction of the parkways, bridges, and public parks that still, to this day, shape so much about America's biggest city. In 1929, early in his career, he led the creation of Jones Beach State Park, which is today still the most popular beach on the East Coast. According to the writer Marcin Wichary, it provided him with enough of the public's goodwill to last until almost the end of his life. The key word there is almost. In the 1960s, cracks started forming around his regime. He was in charge of the 1964 World's Fair, hosted at the space that would eventually become today's Flushing Meadows Park. His goal was to make all this money off the fair and use it to fund this big, beautiful park that eventually he hoped would be named after him. But the fair was a giant, colossal flop, thanks mostly to his own hard-headedness and just how generally difficult he was to work with. Many of the things that we look at as landmarks in that park today, like the New York State Pavilion, are actually only still there because they cost more to demolish than to keep. They just didn't have enough money to knock them down. Moses' public opinion tanked, and he ended up trying to disappear into the background, choosing to not even bother to name the park after him. Public opinion on Robert Moses shifted even harder after his retirement, thanks to hindsight and the analysis in the 1974 book The Power Broker, which contained anecdotes about how racism informed some of his decisions to build highways through neighborhoods, and how his lack of support of public transit made that inequality even worse in a lasting way. But while he was still in power, he started that process by shooting himself in the foot and ruining his own legacy. Some would argue that Lil Wayne just did the same thing. His album The Carter 6, the latest in a long-running series that has, in my count, at least 2 classics in there, has been widely panned and beyond that just straight up made fun of. It's hard to find many redeeming qualities across this thing. The one song people have made fun of the most is Peanuts to an Elephant, which has elephant noises in the beat, and was for some reason produced by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Honestly, it's not the worst song on the album. Island Holiday is an awful interpolation of a Weezer song. The song with Bono from U2 sounds like it was cryogenically frozen in 2011 in like the worst way possible. It's heartwarming to see on the tracklist that Wayne got to spend some time with his kids in the studio, but that feeling goes away when you actually hear the songs. Even 2018's The Carter 5, which wasn't really holding a candle to the previous Carters, had a hit in Uproar and a nice heartfelt song at the end in Let It All Work Out. That album sounds like Illmatic compared to The Carter 6. As a result, we've gotten headlines all over the internet in the past couple weeks like, did Lil Wayne ruin his legacy? Wayne is not the first legend to be accused of something like this, and he probably won't be the last. So today I want to try to understand what a legacy really is. We'll take a look at Wayne and 2 other artists who have caught this kind of narrative recently, and have a discussion about how fair that conversation is. Is their present work or their current persona really so bad that it loses them all of the aura points that they accumulated? Speaking of aura, this video is sponsored by Aura. Have you ever found yourself second guessing whether a text message or an email was real or a scam? The other day, I almost clicked on a fake email after one of my friends got hacked. Even if you're good at figuring it out by yourself, think of your loved ones. I know my dad comes to me with spam texts all the time like, is this real? What about a time when you were waiting for an important call? Did you end up answering every unknown number just in case? After talking to the 10th spam caller, did it feel like a giant waste of time? Aura will help you remove your personal information from data brokers and people search sites that can sell your info to identity thieves, scammers, and more. Aura monitors your personal data, including your social security number, across billions of data points, like the dark web and public court records, to alert you about potential identity theft. You'll get notified in minutes when your credit file has been compromised, like if someone tries to open credit cards or loans in your name. This is just scratching the surface of what you can get with Aura. There's Aura VPN, which protects your internet connection with military-grade encryption. There's antivirus services to secure your Android, PC, or Mac from malware, including viruses, spyware, trojans, ransomware, and more. There's a password manager to store your online passwords safely and conveniently across apps. I wish I had this when my Instagram got hacked and some guy in Turkey was asking my fans for money. You can get all this in one app at one affordable price. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches and brokers. And if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/HADJI to try 2 weeks free. That'll be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal information has been exposed. Thanks again to Aura for sponsoring this video. Let's get back into it. Before we get into this video, I think it makes sense to define the term that we're going to be focusing on. Oxford defines legacy as the long-lasting impact of particular events, actions, etc. that took place in the past or of a person's life. We now also have to define impact, which Oxford says is to have a strong effect on someone or something. So to put these two into more colloquial speak, an artist's legacy is what leaves the strongest effect on us as fans and on the industry as a whole. I think that can be a bit subjective. The effect that Lil Wayne had on a kid who was growing up in New Orleans at the same time is probably different than what it had on me as a kid in New York, seeing him on the internet and hearing him on the radio. And it's drastically different from a kid in Poland or Morocco who listened to Lil Wayne's music to learn English. Here's a way to think about legacy that I find helpful. An alien came down to Earth, landed on your porch, knocked on your door, you let him in, he's sitting on your couch, he's like showing you all this cool Martian shit. And then he starts asking you about humanity, and he's like, yo, I found these artists on Spotify, like, can you tell me about them? What would you say to him if he asked you about Lil Wayne? If he asked you about Eminem? If he asked you about Kanye West? Let's get into it. Lil Wayne is certainly not the first or last rapper to call himself the best rapper alive, but during his prime, he had one of the best cases out of anybody. A true prodigy, he was already appearing on rap albums at the age of 12. When he was only 17, he dropped his debut solo album, The Block Is Hot, and was off to the races. It can be hard to put into perspective just how early Lil Wayne began his career. He's often seen as the wise elder to a generation of rappers that he put on, including Drake and Nicki Minaj. But the wild truth is, he and Nicki are the same age, and Drake is only 4 years younger than Wayne. When rap fans sit back and have their roundtable discussions about their top fives, there are a few metrics that are commonly used. One of those is how many classic albums a rapper has. That's a little bit subjective, but there are some generally agreed upon albums that could get that stamp. And I think Wayne definitely has two, the Carter 2 and the Carter 3. The second one is probably a more even listen than the third one, but given my age range and the fact that I had the Carter 3 on CD and was like hotly anticipating it, I know which one I'm going with. When it comes to determining legacy though, using studio albums for Lil Wayne is not going to be the best way to get there. A kid who was born in 2007 who uses Spotify or Apple Music to try to see what an artist did in their past, they're gonna be missing a huge chunk of the Lil Wayne story. And that's because Lil Wayne dominated in two categories that don't always appear right on the homepage of a DSP: mixtapes and features. Wayne is in the Mount Rushmore of mixtape artists, with multiple classics under his belt, some of which have found their way onto DSPs, but there is so much Lil Wayne music just floating around on the internet. He was around in the era where rappers would just drop these free mixtapes on the internet, and they'd be rapping over other people's beats. And he was the Grim Reaper of other people's beats. Once he touched that beat, it might not be yours anymore. No Ceilings is my personal favorite Wayne mixtape, but The Drought 3, Dedication 2 are ones that other people throw into the ring a lot. Mixtape Wayne is almost like a different person than studio album Wayne. When you heard the lighter flick, you knew what time it was. The other place that Lil Wayne made a musical impact outside of just his studio albums was on features. He might be the original feature killer. That's something he's kept going until this day. In a Rolling Stone interview he gave ahead of the Carter 6, he told the interviewer that there's never been a time he's turned down the feature as long as they'll pay, even if he doesn't actually like the song. I look at it as a challenge. You're gonna have to be the reason why you like it. I'll kill it and be like, that shit wasn't whack at all. I killed that bitch. Don't play his verse, just play mine. Lil Wayne has a pretty strong claim to be the greatest feature artist of all time. He was versatile enough during his prime to give you a top tier hook or a verse, and if you were lucky enough, maybe both. Hooks on songs like Fat Joe's Make It Rain, Play the Circle's Duffel Bag Boy, Drake's Hell Yeah F***ing Right, and The Game's My Life immediately come to mind. While verses on songs like Drake's The Motto, Ludacris's Last of a Dying Breed, Jadakiss's Death Wish showed that he could go up there toe to toe with some of the best rappers of each era and leave without a scratch. He could get on an R&B song like Destiny Child's Soldier or Lloyd's You and steal the show as well. Whenever he was on a big posse cut like one of the Young Money hits or Forever or Swagger Like Us or a DJ Khaled song, I don't think there's ever been a time that there was a consensus that he had the weakest verse. And even as age and the rock star lifestyle started to catch up to him, he's still been able to steal the show from time to time on more relatively recent features, like Solange's Mad or Tyler the Creator's Dropping Seeds. And the crazy thing is, with the amount of songs that I just rattled off, have I even named like 5% of them? There will be, without a doubt, comments on this video like, how did you not mention insert feature? And they're gonna be totally right. Now that we've laid some of the groundwork for understanding why Lil Wayne is a living legend, let's talk about his legacy. Here's what Lil Wayne is: an alien. If you had to explain Lil Wayne to an alien, the alien's gonna be like, that sounds like Dwayne. We went to middle school together. Wayne is someone who held the crown for best rapper alive longer than most rappers will ever get to claim. one of the most prolific rappers of all time, and then you take into account that a lot of those songs are good, probably the top one feature rapper of all time when you take into account the quantity and the pretty consistent quality. Here's what Lil Wayne has never been, not even during his prime: an artist with a flawless discography. Now, I am one of the biggest Rebirth defenders on earth, but that is not an album that was received well when it came out, and it was when he was at his peak commercially. We could look at his 2013 album, I Am Not a Human Being 2, which for sure has a lot of songs that people have come back to, like I'm on that good cushion alcohol or Rich as Fuck. But as an album experience, it's definitely not really a cohesive thing. What I remember that album the most for was it started with this like dramatic piano for like a minute in the intro, and you're like, okay, let's see where he's gonna take this. And then he comes in with, I'm in the crib butt naked bitch. She said my dick could be the next black president. And even as a teenager who like lived through Wheezy Mania, I was like, all right, man, this guy just might not be an album guy. This complex legacy is one where if you were there in the moment to understand the combined impact of the big albums, the mixtapes, and the features, especially in comparison to what the field was offering, whether it was fun but more simplified ringtone rap where you wouldn't really get a lot of clever punchlines, or the older generation of more commercially successful rappers from the first half of the 2000s like 50 Cent or Nelly kind of starting to fall off the wagon a little bit, then you understand the value of what Lil Wayne was doing. Or you can listen to some of today's biggest and most successful rappers when they tell you that Lil Wayne is one of their prime influences. Young Thug, Kendrick Lamar. You understand that what he did like structurally in rapping, with melody, with punchlines, with the confidence he would exude on the mic, with the way he used auto-tune, he is an absolutely revolutionary figure when it just comes to the art of rapping, period. But not everybody was there during that run. Look at the people making fun of him during this like Super Bowl discourse over the last year, where some people were like, how could he even think he was gonna get the Super Bowl? If they hired me, I would have put together a hell of a set list. But for the people who look back just using the metrics of album sales or just like number of classic albums, and they might not see the full vision of Lil Wayne. So with that logic, how are we gonna say that Lil Wayne is ruining his legacy by dropping a bad album? That's always been a part of the Lil Wayne story. If this album didn't have the Carter tag attached to it, I don't think anybody would have bat an eye at Lil Wayne dropping a bad album in 2025. If this was the sequel to the tape he dropped in 2023, The Fix Before the Six, and he called it The Heaven Before the Seven, nobody would make a stink about it. That would be business as usual. So to me, the Carter 6 does very little, if anything, to damage the legacy of a legendary but complicated figure in rap music. As we evaluate the other artists in this video, we should think critically about what their individual legacy means, beyond just thinking like, do they make good things versus do they make bad things? At the end of the day, there's more for us to unpack here with these legends, so let's keep going. Love him or hate him, Eminem is one of the most consequential rappers in history. Marshall Mathers spent years grinding away in the Detroit rap scene to no avail. His debut album, Infinite, was ignored by most and panned by those who did hear it. And it was the negative feedback he got from that experience that pushed him to make that next batch of songs angrier and angrier. That rage culminated in his next project, the Slim Shady EP, which got into the hands of Dr. Dre, who immediately had to meet the guy writing these crude, vulgar, but technically impressive raps. They worked on his debut major label album, the Slim Shady LP, together, which went on to go 4 times platinum, matching the shade of bleached blonde hair that Eminem was rocking back in the day. Sure, it was crude, violent, and vulgar, but songs like Rock Bottom also showed glimpses of the depth he would go on to explore in the future. It only took one album to turn Eminem into a potential icon for rap fans, and just rebellious youth as a whole. But his second album, the Marshall Mathers LP, stamped that status, selling an unfathomable 1.7 million copies in its first week alone. Eminem became the default poster on the wall for teen boys, especially white ones, but honestly probably a more diverse fan base than you would expect during his prime. He was starting to wade into deeper topics on the Marshall Mathers LP, from doing some self-reflection on his status as a white rapper on The Way I Am, or telling the classic and harrowing story of fandom gone wrong on Stan, a song that's literally birthed a very popular term. That album was perhaps a little darker and less cartoonish, but no less violent. Kim is the type of song that you had to run to skip if you were playing it around your parents, or you're gonna see that CD get snapped in half like a Kit Kat bar. R-word, murder, the content of the album looks like a list of things they tell me that I can't say on YouTube. The song I'm Back makes a reference to the Columbine massacre that was so vulgar that the explicit version has it beeped out. Steve Spurgeon, then the director of communications for GLAAD, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, said, "The album contains the most blatantly offensive homophobic lyrics we have ever heard. Ever. The organization protested his appearance at the 2000 MTV Music Awards, which led him, as some form of olive branch, to perform Stan with Elton John at the next year's Grammys. His third major label album, The Eminem Show, went on to become the best-selling album of 2002, and today has sold more than 27 million copies worldwide. It's less slapstick violence and more political commentary and personal stuff. Two of his most popular songs ever are on there. Without Me carries the legacy of Eminem lead singles like The Real Slim Shady, where he reminds you why he's important by making fun of whatever's going on in the world at that time, kind of like a musical episode of South Park. And Till I Collapse is the ultimate first-person shooter video game trailer song. But The Eminem Show also has songs like Haley's Song, where M is sweetly singing about his daughter, or, I mean, it's sweet if you skip like a couple lines on the last verse. This is a precursor for the song Mockingbird on his 2004 album Encore, where Eminem stands in front of the world and says, "You know me as a provocateur, but now you will see this sweeter, softer, family man side of me." Encore also had the song Like Toy Soldiers, which saw Eminem being mature in analyzing and looking back on some of the more vicious rap beefs that he had found himself being a part of over his career. But the rest of Encore was, weird. Songs like Big Weenie and Rain Man are just straight up bizarre. And it must have been jarring in the moment to hear arguably the biggest rapper in the world at the time making these like hokey joke songs. But Eminem in 2017 gave a pretty good explanation to Vulture as to why it came out like this. "I'm cool with probably half that album. I recorded that towards the height of my addiction. I remember 4 songs leaked and I had to go to LA and get Dre and record new ones. I was in a room by myself writing songs in 25-30 minutes because we had to get it done. And what came out was so goofy. That's how I ended up making songs like Rain Man and Big Weenie. They're pretty out there. If those other songs hadn't leaked, Encore would have been a different album." Eminem went on a 5-year hiatus in terms of solo albums after this project, returning in 2009 with Relapse. But in the meantime, he had been suffering heavily from an addiction to painkillers, one that only got worse in 2006 when his best friend Proof was murdered. When he finally came back with Relapse, he was sober, but he sounded kinda off, veering into these weird accents on a lot of the songs. In that same interview, he said Relapse was all about him relearning how to rap after getting over addiction. At this point in Eminem's discography, a decade into his public-facing career, he had 3 undeniable classic smash hit albums and 2 really weird ones. He then entered an endless Sisyphean loop of apologizing for the previous album with the next one. 2010's Recovery saw him, no pun intended, recover his reputation as a chart darling, but also while accepting this poppier, radio-friendly approach into his repertoire, with songs like Not Afraid and Love the Way You Lie. 2013's Marshall Mathers LP2 was more of the same, with another Rihanna collaboration, The Monster, serving as a big radio hit. This is one half of who 2010's Eminem was. And the other half you get in a song like Rap God, where he's treating the song like more of a technical competition than something that's enjoyable to listen to. 2017's Revival was more like the former, the softer, sing-songier Eminem collaborating with the very celebrities he would have joked about killing on the Slim Shady LP. 2018's Kamikaze and 2020's Music to Be Murdered By are more like the latter, reminding you that he has fully recovered his ability to be a very impressive technical rapper at the expense of what used to make his songs enjoyable. Last year's The Death of Slim Shady is a meta-commentary on that evolution, making fun of his past self while also probably coming as close as he has to recreating it. But still, most of the conversation around Eminem in the last 10 years or so has been about him ruining his legacy. You can find YouTube videos with things like the rise and fall of Eminem, or how Eminem ruined his legacy, or forum posts arguing something along these lines. It's not just music nerds on the internet like me having this kind of convo. In 2022, Snoop Dogg, who is a former collaborator of Eminem, made headlines for saying that Eminem doesn't crack his top 10. More recently, the legendary Melly Mel of Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 also said that Eminem is not a top 5 rapper. So the question becomes, has the second leg of Eminem's career destroyed what he built in the first half? To me, the answer is again, no. Just like Wayne, we need to take a step back and look at what Eminem's legacy really is. Beyond just good and bad. To me, it contains a few things. Being pop culture's biggest provocateur around the turn of the millennium, creating the pathway for a provocateur type artist to then become serious in the public eye, being the biggest white rapper of all time who changed what it meant fundamentally to be a white rapper, and being one of the most impressive technical rappers in mainstream hip-hop. No, I said mainstream, so don't kill me in the comments. Eminem is certainly not the provocateur he was during his original run. Even when he kind of did it on songs like Houdini, it's like it was kind of making a reference to his past self. I honestly feel like it would be way worse for his legacy if he was genuinely trying to be a provocateur at the age of 52. I think artists should be allowed to grow up without necessarily ruining their legacy. Even if that new work is not interesting to me, I gotta give him credit where credit's due. So many of the rappers today, probably inspired by Eminem, who go out of their way to be provocateurs, come off as unbearably cringe. And even if you don't like the Eminem pop radio songs, aren't they better than him like painting himself as the Joker and doing something that Dax would do? At the same time, other artists who have had provocateur phases earlier in their careers, like Tyler the Creator or Earl Sweatshirt, have evolved in front of us, which is a cool and major part of their stories. Eminem was one of the most notable people to do that in hip-hop, and that's a big part of his legacy to me. Watching an artist grow is extremely rewarding for fans who stick with them throughout the time, but it's also okay to let those artists grow apart from you, or if you grow apart from them. Just like Wayne's situation, Eminem dropping bad albums shouldn't ruin his legacy, because after 2004, it's not like he had anything close to a perfect discography anyway. I will say it might ding him a little bit harder than Lil Wayne, because he doesn't have as many features as Wayne, he didn't have as many mixtapes as Wayne, and he really was an album artist for like the first 3 albums of his career. But at the same time, nothing he's doing now is necessarily taking away from the glory of those earlier projects. Not all artists can say the same. It can be hard to talk about Kanye in a video format like this, because the career of Kanye West has so many twists and turns and chapters that it's better fit for like a Harry Potter length movie series. Filmmakers Cootie and Chike tried to wrap it up neatly into a documentary, the 3-part Netflix series Genius, aptly titled because the adjective genius was probably the one word people would use to describe Kanye's legacy for the first half of his career. Starting out as a producer for acts like Jay-Z and Alicia Keys, Ye hustled through rejection to earn an opportunity to finally step in front of the mic, and made the most of it with his debut album The College Dropout, going triple platinum, getting nominated for Album of the Year at the Grammys, and winning Best Rap Album. Pretty good for your first album. Late Registration was brave enough to ask the question, what if we did the same thing, but we also spent millions of dollars on getting a live orchestra? And the result was another huge success. When it came time for Ye's third album, Graduation, he married the soul samples with stadium-ready synths and shutter shades for a more concise and beloved third album. Ye was on top of the world in 2007, but it came crashing down at the end of the year when he tragically lost his mother Donda during a medical procedure. His next album, 2008's 808s and Heartbreak, dealt with this loss by veering into a sadder, stripped back, auto-tune-filled sound. It was divisive at the time of his release, with his rival 50 Cent making fun of the single Love Lockdown on stage, but proved to be massively influential for the next decade of R&B and hip-hop, directly influencing some of the biggest artists like Drake and The Weeknd. Through his discography to this point, Kanye established himself as someone who would take risks that would almost always pay off. Outside of the music, he gained a reputation for speaking his mind, whenever he felt like that was necessary. Many music fans knew him for his music first, but the general public mostly saw him for outbursts. In 2005, Kanye was on an MSNBC live stream raising money for the victims of Hurricane Katrina, when he said that the president, George W. Bush, didn't care about black people. In 2006, Kanye went on stage at the MTV Awards, after Justice won an award for their song We Are Your Best Friends, and Kanye said, if I don't win, the award show loses. This would be a precursor for one of the bigger moments of his career, when he went on stage at the VMAs in 2009 after Taylor Swift won, ranting that Beyonce had the greatest video of all time. That third outburst was the straw that broke the camel's back to the general public, leading Kanye to feel like he needed to make the greatest and most maximalist album that he could as an apology. That's how we got 2010's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, combining bits and pieces of all of his previous work into a souped-up product that achieved his goal of getting everyone to forget about the Taylor thing for a little bit. He was on top of the world for the following 2 years, dropping Watch the Throne, an expensive-sounding collab album with longtime friend Jay-Z, and Cruel Summer, a pretty successful label compilation that put the world on to Travis Scott. He was becoming a well-rounded commercial powerhouse. After dipping his toe into fashion around the Graduation era, he expanded that with a limited but very coveted and well-received series with Nike, the Air Yeezy. He also married Kim Kardashian, one of the biggest celebrities in the world at the time. He then, in true Kanye fashion, subverted all expectations with his 2013 album Yeezus. Abrasive, vulgar, and industrial, the album was a smelling salt for fans who were expecting another My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. He wore a mask covered in crystals for the tour and performed with a mountain, establishing himself as more than just a studio artist, but someone who could present a well-thought-out and artistic live experience. After Yeezus, he transcended even further into the status of icon. He left Nike for Adidas, creating several Yeezy silhouettes that would go on to become some of the most popular shoes of the last decade, to the point where people are wearing them and even if they know who Kanye is, they don't even know he's the guy who made the shoe. He was becoming as dominant in fashion as he was in music, without skipping a beat in either. He went on interviews comparing himself to Steve Jobs and Walt Disney, and in 2015, who could tell him otherwise? To many, 2016's Life of Pablo continued that upward trend for Ye, bringing in tons of huge collaborators, pushing music further into the digital age with its open source release approach, and producing some more beloved Kanye songs like Father Stretch My Hands and Wolves. But to me, this is also where you might start to see some cracks in the machine. The album title was changed publicly on Twitter multiple times. The mixes for some songs were unfinished and then later changed, which could be seen as cutting edge, but could also be seen as just lazy. Some will stand by this project as the peak of Ye, but others can't help but see it as the onset of so many of the symptoms that we see with him today. It's hard not to argue though that The Life of Pablo is the moment on the Kanye roller coaster where you sit at the top for a minute before it all flies down. In 2018, Kanye went gung-ho in his support for President Donald Trump, donning the red MAGA hat at a time when that was a little bit less popular, which annoyed the mainstream media and also a pretty decent chunk of his fan base. He coupled it with the album Ye, a short and scatterbrained but kind of fascinating 7-track album. I have a soft spot for this album, but it's pretty strange in his discography and it also pales in comparison to pretty much everything that came before it. What came after though was a much sharper downturn. He veered into some sort of gospel with Jesus is King, which was messy and unfinished, but it didn't really have the interesting ideas that you also got with Ye. He recovered a bit with Donda, which was vintage Ye in some ways, in terms of its release being a beautiful mess, playing versions of it live in arenas as he tinkered with it in real time. The final release, to me, has a lot of the issues that Life of Pablo does. Moments that just feel like they didn't have that clear-headed final day of editing that made his early work so great. You know, maybe like the vocal delivery on a verse is just like a little bit too muffly, or the beat goes on a little bit too long at the end of a song with no vocals and something needs to change to make that interesting and it just doesn't happen. It's those final touches that are missing. Donda has so many good songs, but it's like he was on the last day of completion and just turned it in. There were glimpses of hope here though, ones that were quickly washed away with the mess that was Donda 2. The first Vultures collab with Ty Dolla $ign had some people thinking it was a rebound, but Vultures 2 again wiped that all away. And the worst part of Vultures 2 is it marked the beginning of Kanye relying on AI. Everything from then on out has been a sloppy, attention-grabbing, AI-driven mess. And it seems to get worse and worse every day. I think the strongest argument for any of the artists out of the three to have ruined their legacy is for Kanye. But it really has to do with how I and many others saw his legacy in the first place. Lil Wayne was seen as prolific and alien-like in his own world, and he could rap on anything. And Eminem was seen as a vulgar provocateur who grew up in front of us in real time and also happened to be one of the best technical rappers of his era. Their newer works can continue to be all of those things without actually being good. Kanye, on the other hand, had the legacy of being a genius. He wasn't infallible in his personal life. He wasn't infallible when you put a mic in front of him on TV, but when it came to the discography, he was about as close to batting 1,000 as anyone could be. Everything he releases that doesn't have that in it just muddies his image. You can't just show the hypothetical alien on your couch the "he made graduation" meme and call it a day. He was seen as a mastermind collaborator when he put Chief Keef and Justin Vernon together on Hold My Liquor. When his solo music starts to fall flat, people can ask the question, how much of it was him and how much of it was the great collaborators he had around him? It might not be a fair question to ask. I don't think I would ask it personally, but the weakness of his recent output has opened the door for it, and that's a problem in itself. To play devil's advocate, Ye has always been a bit of a contrarian, unafraid to speak his mind even when it wasn't the popular thing to do. And even some of the specific antics that we see today are not that different from the ones of the past. Imagine what he would have been saying on Twitter in 2006. We see him dressing his partner Bianca in pretty much nothing and taking her to the Grammys. Some might not know that his 2008 listening party for 808s and Heartbreak was in a loft full of nude models. There's a lens where the Kanye who said George Bush doesn't care about black people is the same Kanye who's dissing Kamala Harris on Twitter, because to him they probably both represent the expectation that he wants to subvert. But the difference from 2018 onward, whether it's a direct result of the antics or just a similar symptom of the same root cause, is that the music started to suffer. So in a way, is ruining a legacy just undoing a reputation? Kanye had a reputation that so few in music have ever had, just consistently being very close to flawless. It's a very difficult reputation to uphold. And you can argue that that kind of pressure and that kind of expectation is the reason why you don't see Andre 3000 rapping, because he's got close to a flawless discography with Outkast, and he might not want to mess that up, so he's just walking around with the flute. But I don't know, even with all this, I don't think him being a contrarian, attention seeker, just saying the most vile things that come to mind, guy who let nitrous fry his brain, is necessarily just going to negate the value of everything that came before. Instead, it's a bit like a TV show with a really unsatisfying ending, like Game of Thrones or Lost. Maybe to some, it ruins the whole journey. Maybe to some, it's a cautionary tale. But others can compartmentalize and enjoy what they had in the beginning. And this is not at all a cosign of the things that Kanye says on Twitter. Like, they have probably irreparably changed the way that I see Kanye as a person. But when it comes to the legacy of his music, I'm not sure that it fully alters the things that came, pre-2016. You think about a guy like R. Kelly, where his unbelievably heinous crimes are also like inherently tied to the content of the music he was making, and you're like, that is a ruined legacy. Because how do you listen to that knowing what he did? Legacies are anthologies or long stories with chapters in them. The story might start out fun and then take a less fun turn later. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the earlier chapters lose their value. The impact of all three of these artists is undeniable. Beyond their own personal achievements, their fingerprints are all over today's music. Wayne personally put on Drake and Nicki Minaj. And artists like Young Thug and Kendrick will tell you that he changed the way that they rap. Eminem gave way to the rise of Odd Future, and he taught young artists how to grow up in public, and changed the way that any white rapper could ever be perceived ever after him. Kanye helped put on artists like Travis Scott, Big Sean. And even if he wasn't the first guy to do it, he helped push that moody, auto-tune sound into the mainstream. He pushed for rap music to be treated like the high-value art that it is. And when you sit the alien down, I think you do have to tell him about the crazy stuff that Kanye is up to today, but it doesn't just negate everything that came before it either. That's where I'm at with it. Let me know if there's any other artists that you feel like I could have put in this video to talk about their legacy. If you like videos on music like this one, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe. I post a video every week. If you want to check them out early, go to my Instagram, HADJI Gaviota, throw me a follow, and join my broadcast channel. I post all my videos in there one day early for free. Also, I, HADJI Gaviota, am going on tour this summer. If you live in the West Coast or the Midwest or New York, there's a pretty good chance I'm coming to your city. Come say what's up. Let me know what you want me to cover next. Peace.